Welcome back to part 2 of Solace, where past wounds and present desires collide under warm café light. In this chapter of the story, the quiet electricity between Jin and Amara deepens. Yet so does the tension of everything he's hiding. As poetry fills the room and old ghosts stir in the shadows, he slips further into the persona of Jin Han, the man he wishes he were, and the man she believes she's meeting for the first time. But every stolen glance, every shared word, pulls him closer to a truth he can't outrun. Redemption isn't won by masks, and the girl he once hurt has become a woman he can't ignore. The past whispers, the present tempts, and the possibility of forgiveness flickers between them like candlelight.
The week slipped by without a single glimpse of Jin Han. Amara told herself she was fine with that. More than fine. He was a grown man after all, probably busy. Probably had bigger problems than stopping by Solace for his nightly pour-over. But every evening, as the street lamps blinked awake outside, her eyes betrayed her, glancing at the door whenever the bell above it chimed. Each time, disappointment flickered through her before she could hide it beneath a smile for the next customer. By Saturday, even Kelly noticed. "My girl," she said, dragging her stool up to the counter, "if you check that door one more time, I'm charging you rent for longing." Amara snorted, wiping down a mug that didn't need cleaning. "You're imagining things." "Am I? 'Cause you've been humming sad R&B all day and sighing into the espresso foam like it's your diary." "I'm just tired, Kel." Kelly gave her a long, knowing look but dropped it. "All right, but you keep acting like this. I'm gonna start putting his coffee on the menu as the Jin Han special. Brooding flavor with a shot of mystery." Amara rolled her eyes, but she laughed anyway, the sound echoing lightly against tiled walls, loosening something in her chest. It wasn't until that evening, after Kelly left for the night, that Amara noticed the changes. The two men who'd come before hadn't returned. Not a single trace, no calls, no visits. The card they'd left sat untouched in her desk, and strangely, her landlord, who was normally slow answering her texts, had messaged that morning to say her rent had been adjusted to reflect community grants. Then there was the city inspector who showed up unannounced, smiled like he knew something she didn't, and left after glancing around for barely 2 minutes. Amara felt a strange mix of relief and unease. It all felt too convenient. That night after closing, the street outside seemed quieter than usual. Not empty. Hongdae never truly slept, but muted, as if someone had dimmed the background noise of the world. She stepped outside with a garbage bag, cool air brushing against her arms. That's when she noticed it. A black sedan idling 2 blocks down, headlights off. The driver's silhouette was just visible under the street lamp's faint spill of light. Her first instinct was fear tightening in her gut, but then the car pulled away, smooth and unhurried, like it had only been waiting to see her lock up safely. Amara lingered on the curb for a moment, her keys cold in her hand. She thought of Jin Han, the soft intensity of his eyes, the strange gravity he carried, the silence that seemed to follow him in and out of the café. She remembered the rumor-like edge of his confidence, the slight menace beneath his calm. She didn't know what world he came from, but nights like this made her wonder if he carried more of Seoul's darkness than he ever let slip. And still, even knowing that, a part of her missed him. She turned the sign to closed and whispered to herself as she shut the door. "You're not that girl anymore, Amara Carter. You don't wait on anyone." Inside, she started restocking for the morning rush, the sound of her steady movements filling the small golden room. But every now and again, her gaze found that empty table in the back corner, and for reasons she couldn't name, she left it vacant. Just in case. For 2 weeks, Jin kept his distance. He watched Solace from the shadows of the opposite sidewalk, eyes following the soft amber glow spilling through its windows onto the narrow Hongdae street. The café always looked like warmth personified, like something he could never fully enter without corrupting it. He'd told himself he was only ensuring her safety. That was the logical part. Min-jae's reports confirmed the café was left alone. No more visits, no more threats. His rivals had gotten the message. But still, Seo Jin found himself driving past Solace almost every night, telling himself he was just checking the perimeter, even when he knew it was nothing more than yearning dressed up as duty. From a parked car down the street, he watched her through the window some evenings, her laughter with customers, the rhythm of her hands as she worked, the tilt of her head when she paused to listen to someone read. Each glimpse dug under his ribs. Protecting her had somehow made him vulnerable, and that truth unsettled him more than any bullet ever could. He belonged to a world that swallowed good things whole. She belonged to the light. He told himself it would be cowardly to go back. And yet one night he found himself walking through the door anyway. The bell above the café chimed, cutting through a steady flow of music and murmur. For a moment, conversation paused, then resumed as people recognized him, the quiet stranger who'd vanished. Amara looked up from behind the counter, shoulders stiffening before she smoothed her expression into polite warmth. "Good evening, Jin Han," she said, her tone soft but just formal enough to sting. Seo Jin nodded lightly. "Evening. The usual." "Yes, please." She moved efficiently, every precise motion echoing the mildness in her voice, no teasing smile, no blush. The distance in her eyes told him she'd learned not to expect him. His logical mind said good. This boundary kept her safe, but his heart, traitorous, reckless, ached for something closer. He sat at his old table while the poetry night unfolded. The crowd was familiar, their laughter bright. Elise, the British romantic, read first, a wry piece about love and flight delays. Kalichi followed with something funny and tender about home. Kelly's riotous poem about her boyfriend's clumsy proposal earned a round of laughter that shook the windows. And then Amara was called. Her notebook trembled slightly in her hands as she rose. She looked unsure, caught off guard, and when her gaze flicked toward Seo Jin, something flickered there. He ignored the tremor in his pulse and stared down at the mug between his fingers while she read a brief poem about courage. When she finished, the applause made her blush, and she hurried back to her seat, avoiding his eyes. The group leader looked around. "Anyone else care to share?" Seo Jin's voice came before he fully decided. "I will." A few heads turned, surprised. He rose and walked toward the center of the circle. The room stilled, some whispering what he might say, others curious about the man whose silence had always seemed unshakable. He took the mic, his dark eyes finding Amara's across the room. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, low, carrying the magnetism of confession. "I seem placid, an iceberg barely shifting, all cool edges and sharp planes. But beneath, the waters churn. Old violence swirling in the dark that shaped me. I have moved through storms that taught my hands to strike before they could open, taught my heart to harden before it could heal. Yet even in the murk, a small glow rises. A longing for stillness, for the warmth of forgiveness, for a way to drift without leaving wreckage behind. I am not only what I've done. I am the part of me straining upward, hoping the sun remembers me, hoping peace can find the hidden depths and quiet them." For several seconds after, no one moved. Then the room erupted, snapping fingers, cheers, laughter. But Seo Jin barely heard them. His eyes never left Amara. Under his gaze, she glowed, cheeks flushed, eyes soft, a slow smile blooming that showed the faint dimples he hadn't been able to forget. When the crowd thinned and last-minute goodbyes echoed out the door, Amara approached his table. She slid into the chair opposite him, arms crossed loosely. "Well," she said, head tilted, eyes bright with a mixture of surprise and challenge, "she never would have pegged you as the poetic type." He smiled faintly. "You bring it out of me." The air between them thickened, tender and electric. Seo Jin reached across the small table, his hand covering hers. Warm, certain. The simple contact set her pulse leaping. "Have dinner with me," he said. Amara hesitated, caught between reason and something deeper, then let herself smile, small and genuine. Maybe, she whispered. This time it was him who felt unsteady. The man who could command fear with a glance sat silent in front of the only woman who made him wish he knew how to be good.
Will Seo Jin's guilt ever lead to honesty? Or will he continue to hide who he was and is? Keep listening to find out what happens next.
Okay, sis, Kelly exclaimed, striding into Amara's bedroom with the kind of energy that made the walls feel alive. I see you, trying to show Jin Han what a true Nubian queen looks like. You don't think it's too much? Amara asked, turning in front of the full-length mirror. Absolutely not. Kelly crossed her arms and gave a slow, appreciative nod. You know purple is your color. It's giving classy. That slit is giving him just a taste of chocolate, just enough to keep him thinking. Amara tried not to laugh, but her nerves betrayed her. She could always count on Kelly's brutal honesty, comforting because it was never laced with envy, only truth. She glanced once more at the mirror. The royal purple midi dress hugged her just right, the gold chain dipping daringly into the V neckline. Her locks, swept to one shoulder, gleamed like silk against bronze skin. For once, she wasn't the cafe owner in her apron and jeans. She was a woman ready to turn heads. Barry appeared behind Kelly, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Bae," he rumbled, "don't you think our girl looks stunning?" "Absolutely," Barry said before Kelly could even answer. "Amara, you're killing it." Amara rolled her eyes but couldn't help grinning. A knock sounded at the door. "Right on time." "I'll get it," Kelly sang, hurrying down the hall. Amara peeked out just in time to see Jin Han step into the living room, and her breath caught. The man standing beneath the light was devastating in charcoal gray, his suit tailored perfectly to his broad frame, his black silk shirt open just enough to reveal inky tattoos curling along his collarbone. Confidence radiated off him, quiet and unforced. Taking a deep breath, Amara emerged from her bedroom, the faint click of her heels drawing his gaze. His eyes swept over her slowly, reverently. "You look exquisite," he said, voice low and rich. She smiled, shy but proud. "You clean up nicely yourself." For a moment, neither of them remembered that anyone else existed, until Kelly cleared her throat in exaggerated warning. "Oh, Jin!" Amara said quickly, finding her composure. "This is Kelly's fiancé, Barry." The men exchanged firm handshakes, brief but cordial. Jin offered a polite congratulations on the engagement. "Welp," Kelly said, flashing a knowing grin. "Barry and I are going to leave you two lovebirds to your special night." She disappeared down the hallway before Amara could protest. Outside, Amara stopped short. Parked at the curb was a glossy black Maybach, gleaming under the streetlights. A driver stood beside it, holding the door open. Her heart fluttered. Jin placed a guiding hand at the small of her back, sending heat spiraling up her spine as he helped her into the car. The plush leather interior smelled faintly of cedar and expensive polish. He sat close, not indecently, but enough that she could feel the warmth of him. As the car pulled away, his voice dropped to a murmur. "You smell incredible," he said. Then, leaning closer, he breathed her in near her shoulder. Her pulse stumbled. To regain composure, she said lightly, "I realize I've never asked what you do." Jin's smile was polite, unreadable. "I inherited my father's business," he said after a pause, eyes fixed on the city passing outside. "Imports, investments, a little of everything." There was something carefully vague in his tone, too smooth, too practiced. Before she could press further, he tilted his head toward the window. "We're here." The restaurant's lobby whispered luxury. Gold light bathed marble floors, crystal chandeliers shimmered like constellations. The moment they stepped inside, staff members straightened instinctively. Their deference bordered on reverence, and it made Amara's curiosity flare. Who was he? Every glance that followed them, servers, diners, even the maître d', spoke of recognition, the kind that made her uneasy. They crossed through the main dining room and into a private elevator. As it ascended, the soft strains of a jazz instrumental filled the small space. Amara caught her reflection in the mirrored wall, his dark silhouette standing just behind her, and felt her heart pace quicken again. When the doors slid open, her breath caught. The rooftop stretched before them like a dream. Glass railings framed the panoramic view of Seoul's skyline, towers glittering like stars scattered across the horizon, the Han River glittering below like liquid silver. Floating lanterns hung overhead, their pale golden light shimmering in the soft night breeze. Pots of white orchids lined the stone balustrades, releasing a faint, sweet fragrance. Every table was empty except one. "I thought we might enjoy some quiet," Jin said calmly. She laughed softly. "You rented the whole roof for some quiet?" He smiled. "I like to hear the person I'm with." Dinner began with tiny plates of artistry. Seared scallops drizzled with lemon cream, thin sliced pear over soft cheese, and glasses of Sancerre sparkling crisp under candlelight. Between sips of wine, their talk drifted easily, from travel to favorite poets, from the pace of Seoul life to how the sound of rain always brought Amara peace. When the entrees arrived, grilled sea bass in citrus glaze for her, snow-marbled steak for him, the warmth between them had turned steady and companionable. But curiosity tugged at her again. She set down her wine glass and tilted her head, eyes glinting. "Now, Mr. Jin Han," she began, echoing her teasing tone from the café. "The last time we chatted, I spilled some of my secrets. I believe I said next time it would be your turn to be in the hot seat." He smiled faintly. "Did you?" "Oh, yes. You said you inherited your father's business. I'm assuming that makes him the CEO type." She lifted an eyebrow. "What was it like being the son of a CEO?" For a heartbeat, something shifted in his expression, a shadow crossing behind the calm. He leaned back slightly, fingers tracing the stem of his glass, weighing his words. "Complicated," he said finally. The city lights flickered across his face, catching on the edges of distance in his eyes. Amara watched him carefully, sensing she had brushed against something deeper, and not yet knowing that what she'd taken for a businessman's reserve was the armor of a man living between sin and redemption. For a long moment, Jin just stared at the skyline, the endless grid of lights reflected in his wine glass, golden and fractured. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, the kind of low honesty people used when they weren't used to being honest at all. "My father was the kind of man everyone respected," he began, or pretended to. "Even as a kid, I noticed how the room shifted when he entered, how grown men would straighten their shoulders, watch their words. He built an empire from nothing, and I was supposed to be grateful to inherit it." There was no pride in his voice, only weariness wrapped in control. But gratitude is complicated when every lesson comes wrapped in humiliation. He gave a small laugh that wasn't quite humor. He didn't believe in softness, said affection made men weak. The only language he knew was power. How to take it, how to keep it. I learned early to survive by imitation. He swirled the wine slowly in his glass, the night wind tugging gently at the flame of the nearest candle. "When he died, I told myself I'd run things differently, that I'd be better. But some legacies—" He paused, eyes finding hers. "They cling to the bone." Amara's chest tightened. She hadn't expected his quiet words to cut so close to something inside herself. "I understand," she said softly. He tilted his head, surprised. "My dad was Army," she explained. "Duty and structure were his religion. After the divorce, he went back to the States. 2 phone calls a year, birthdays, maybe Christmas. When he does call, it's all, 'You taking care of your mama?' Or 'You staying focused, Amara?' Never. 'How are you really?' Her smile was small, wistful. "So yeah, I get it. Absent and present at the same time can hurt just as much as gone." Silence folded around them, strangely comforting, filled not with awkwardness but understanding. Jin regarded her quietly. "It seems we both learned early how to be self-sufficient." She met his gaze, lips curving softly. "Maybe, but even self-sufficient people need somewhere to breathe. His eyes lingered on her a moment too long, and she felt it, the heavy warmth of his focus, the air charged again between them. She cleared her throat lightly. "So tell me," she said, breaking the spell with a half-smile, "when you're not conquering the world one business deal at a time, what does Jin Han do for fun?" He looked momentarily caught off guard by the word fun, then smiled faintly. "I listen to poetry." Her eyebrows rose, teasing. "You? I would have pegged you more for boardrooms and spreadsheets." "Maybe both," he allowed, "but poetry helps me remember I still have a pulse. And lately—" He leaned back slightly, eyes tracing her features. "I enjoy hearing it with a certain person at Solace. Conversation helps too, when she's the one across the table." The faint color that rose in Amara's cheeks had nothing to do with the wine. She ducked her head, smiling in spite of herself. "Careful, Mr. Han," she murmured. That almost sounded like flirting. He laughed under his breath, low and genuine this time, the kind of laugh that stripped years of tension from his face. "Then I should say it clearer. You make me want to slow down. That's dangerous for a man used to running." Amara met his gaze again, caught between intrigue and something gentler, deeper. "Maybe slowing down isn't such a bad thing." Jin looked at her then, not as an acquisition, not as curiosity, but as a kind of quiet mercy he didn't think the world would ever grant him. For once, he said nothing. It was enough to sit there, the night wind turning cool around them, Seoul's lights shimmering like another kind of truth neither dared name aloud. The evening had the softness of a dream Seo Jin knew he shouldn't be living. The Maybach moved through the Seoul night, the city lights casting shifting reflections across Amara's face. She sat turned slightly toward the window, the faint wind from the open sunroof playing with the end of her locks. Neither spoke much. There was no need. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full, a hum that drew tauter by the minute. Every bump of the road seemed to sync with his pulse. Every glance she threw from beneath her lashes reminded him why he was skating a knife edge between two worlds. He should have told her that the business he had inherited wasn't built on ledgers and trade, but on loyalty, blood, and fear. That the man sitting beside her wasn't just a CEO, but Seoul's most controlled predator trying desperately not to bare his teeth. But she smiled then, softly, like light reflected off the Han River, and the thought of tearing that peace away felt almost sacrilegious. "Just one night," he told himself. Let her see this version of him a little longer. When the car stopped outside her apartment building, he stepped out first and offered his hand. Her fingers slipped into his, small and steady, grounding him in a way he hadn't realized he needed. They climbed the steps slowly. The air was still warm from the day, humming faintly with the faraway rhythm of the city. Amara pulled her keys from her clutch, her hand shaking slightly. He could feel the question between them. Will you kiss me, or will you let me go? Suspended, delicate, inevitable. He leaned closer, catching the faint scent of jasmine from her hair, the heat of her skin. Time narrowed to a single breath. Then the door flew open. Kelly burst out, half in dress and heels, wild-eyed, with Barry right behind her pulling on his jacket. "Amara! Jin!" she gasped. "Thank God you're here." Amara blinked, the soft haze of the moment breaking instantly. "Kelly? What's wrong?" Barry's face was grim. "We just got a call from the police. Someone broke into the shop." He paused, his voice thick with disbelief. "A brick through the front window. Looks like they trashed the place." "What?" Amara whispered. "Solace?" "Authorities are headed there now," Kelly said, already digging for her phone. "We were just about to drive over." For a heartbeat, everything in Seo Jin went still. He saw only the image of her café, her sanctuary, violated. The calm on his face cracked, heat flooding through the seams as cold fury replaced shock. The softness of the night evaporated, leaving behind the man he tried to hide. "Who?" he asked quietly. Barry shook his head. Police didn't say. They're checking camera footage. Amara's fingers had flown to her mouth. Tears threatened but didn't fall. She steadied herself and stepped past him toward the stairs. I have to go. Seo Jin caught her wrist, not roughly, but with enough pressure to make her stop. When she looked up, his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen. You won't go alone. For a split second, her mind registered the steel in his voice, the kind that didn't come from surprise but from instinct. Something in him shifted entirely, the businessman vanishing, something older and more dangerous taking his place. Jin, she began. It's not up for debate, he said. Calm, cold, absolute. Amara stared at him, her heart thudding. Beneath his composed tone was rage carefully chained. She didn't understand how someone could radiate so much control and so much threat at once, and yet in that moment it didn't scare her. It felt like protection made flesh. Kelly and Barry exchanged quick, uneasy glances before heading down to the car. Seo Jin guided Amara down the steps, his hand firm at her waist now, his thoughts already racing ahead. Someone had dared trespass against what belonged to her. That was more than business. That was personal. As he opened the car door for her, he forced his expression back to still water, but under the surface the current raged. This time he wouldn't wait for reports or intermediaries. Whoever touched Solace would learn that even still waters have a breaking point. The night air outside Solace was colder than it had any right to be. Police lights flared silently against the building's facade, painting the street in pulses of red and blue. Seo Jin leaned against the Maybach, his arms folded, face unreadable but eyes burning with calculation. Min-jae approached from the alley, his shirt sleeves still rolled to the forearms, a faint cut marring his cheek. He gave a small bow of respect before speaking. Hyung-nim, it wasn't neglect. Our men were here. Seo Jin's gaze sliced toward him. Explain. There was a fight, Min-jae said grimly. 2 of Kang Dong-sik's people slipped in through the back, tried to plant something, maybe a message, maybe just to wreck the place. Our guards caught them before they reached the main floor. He glanced toward the shattered window. They realized they couldn't win, so they escalated, managed to break the window before reinforcements arrived. We got them out. No bodies, no evidence. But the mess... He gestured helplessly at the chaos behind the police tape. Seo Jin exhaled slowly through his nose, the sound low and deliberate. You barely cleared them before the police came. Yes, sir. 30 seconds more and it would have been worse. We didn't risk the cleanup crew. Cameras are clean, though. The footage was overwritten. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the idling Maybach and the soft shuffle of cops inside the café. Then Seo Jin spoke, his tone so even it was almost gentle. Kang thinks he's clever. He's not. He's desperate. Min-jae's gaze flicked sideways, studying him. You think he knows, don't you, about her? Seo Jin's eyes didn't move from the glass front of the cafe, where Amara was speaking quietly with the detective, the lamplight catching the sheen of tears on her cheek. He's probing, Min-jae continued, lowering his voice, testing whether she matters to you. That's the only reason to risk something this visible. If he's right, then he'll wish he wasn't, Seo Jin said sharply, cutting him off. A silence stretched again between them, different now, thicker, heavier. Min-jae weighed the risk of asking the next question, but did it anyway. Have you told her who you are? Seo Jin turned his head slowly, his eyes dark and flat as obsidian. The look was not angry, exactly, simply final. No. He turned back toward the cafe, watching as Amara bent to pick up the broken photo of her mother. And she doesn't need to. Min-jae nodded once. He knew better than to pry. This strike won't go unanswered, Seo Jin continued, voice low. Kang has a shipment coming through Busan tomorrow night. I want the authorities waiting for him. Customs, narcotics, whoever you need to bribe or warn. Make sure they have everything they need to tear it apart. I'll see to it personally. Seo Jin's eyes caught the light for a moment, cold steel hidden behind elegant calm. A police raid should keep him busy, worrying about his own house instead of mine. Min-jae hesitated. And you? Should I arrange more men at the café? Seo-jin shook his head. No. He straightened from the car, adjusting his cuffs with mechanical precision. I'll be at her place tonight. Min-jae's brows lifted slightly. You want me to? No, Seo-jin interrupted, voice soft but brooking no argument. Just to make sure she feels safe, that's all. Understood, Min-jae said quietly, though his expression suggested he understood far more than he was allowed to say. As Seo-jin moved toward the cafe door again, the faint glow from inside spilled across his shoes. To anyone watching, he looked composed, merely concerned. But Min-jae saw the truth in his posture, the coil of rage controlled only by willpower and the dangerous weight of a man who finally had something to lose. Kelly decided to stay with Barry that night, saying it would be easier if Amara had the apartment to herself. When Amara and Seo-jin stepped inside, the silence pressed in, thick and heavy after the chaos at Solace. Amara closed the door and turned to him. The apartment's soft lighting edged her face in gold, the fatigue visible now that adrenaline had faded. Thank you, she said quietly. He started to speak, but she gave a small, wobbly smile. What a first date, huh? Something close to a laugh ghosted across his face, but the sound never came. Instead, he reached out, fingertips brushing the tear that had slipped free down her cheek. She looked up, meeting the solemn heat in his gaze. When he bent and kissed her, it was gentle at first. A question. Her lips answered before thought could interfere, deepening the warmth between them until the world narrowed to breath and heartbeat. Then he pulled back suddenly, eyes dark, guilt tightening his jaw. Amara, he said, the single word thick with restraint. I know, she whispered. She could see it, the conflict written across his face, the things he'd never said. You don't have to stay. I'll be okay. He shook his head. No, I'm staying. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she didn't argue. I'll be right out here, he continued, nodding toward the couch. You try to get some sleep. He waited until she disappeared into her bedroom, and he heard the lock click softly before he removed the gun from the holster beneath his jacket. The weapon felt heavier than usual. He set it beside him, covering it with a pillow out of sight. The hiss of running water reached him from the bathroom, faint but constant, mingling with the faint hum of the refrigerator. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. The sound was strangely soothing and torturous all at once. You shouldn't be here, his conscience muttered. But leaving her tonight wasn't an option, not when danger had already crossed her doorstep. He must have let his mind drift, because when he opened his eyes, the water had stopped. The bedroom door creaked softly. Amara stood there, her robe a whispering silk that caught the dim light with every movement. Her locks hung loose, damp ringlets framing her shoulders. The floral scent of her skin was stronger now, tugging at something deep within him. I can't sleep, she said, her voice low. I'm too wired. She settled beside him on the couch, her thigh brushing his. Then her head tilted until it rested gently on his shoulder. For a long moment he didn't move, afraid to break the fragile peace. I watched my mom work herself down to the bone, she murmured. She was an executive assistant for years, long hours, late nights. When I told her I wanted to open a coffee shop, she looked at me like I'd told her I wanted to build a spaceship. She smiled faintly at the memory. After she passed, I used her life insurance, every cent, to open Solace. It was supposed to be a place she'd be proud of. Whoever did this, maybe it wasn't personal to them, but it is to me. My mother's legacy is in those four walls. Seo-jin looked down at her, something tightening in his chest. You're wrong, Amara, he said quietly. She lifted her head, frowning softly. Your mother's legacy isn't just in a building, he continued. It's in you. As long as you breathe, a part of her light, her strength, her beauty stays alive. What they broke can be replaced. What she gave you can't be taken. Her eyes wet again, but the tears didn't fall. She nodded, a small sound catching in her throat. He leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Beneath his lips, he could feel her sigh, the quiet release of tension she'd been carrying all night. Her breathing slowed, steadying until her head grew heavy against his shoulder. Within minutes, she was asleep, her fingers still curled around his sleeve. Jin rested back against the couch, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. The warmth of her body against his side should have been comforting, but all he could feel was the gnawing awareness of every lie he'd told by omission. He'd promised himself he would protect her. He hadn't prepared for what it would cost him. Eventually, he closed his eyes, her weight grounding him like gravity. The city murmured beyond the windows, distant and small. And in that borrowed stillness, the criminal and the dreamer drifted into uneasy sleep on the same couch, united by exhaustion, by need, and by everything neither of them dared to say aloud. Amara woke before the sun fully breached the horizon. For a disoriented moment, she didn't remember how she had ended up on the couch until the even rhythm of another person's breathing pulled her back. Jin Han sat angled against the armrest, one arm draped protectively along the back of the sofa. Even sleeping, he looked composed, though a faint line cut between his brows as if even in rest he wrestled with unseen things. The world outside her window was soft gray, the faint hum of traffic only beginning to stir. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply watch him. This man who had appeared out of nowhere and against her better judgment brought with him both trouble and comfort. "What are you, really?" she wondered silently, though not with fear, more with curiosity, tempered now by gratitude. He had stayed. Quietly, she slipped away from the couch, tugging her robe tighter around her before disappearing into her room. When she emerged 20 minutes later, she was dressed in jeans and a pale cream sweater, hair tied up in a loose bun. Her movements carried a new steadiness. The wreckage at Solace might have broken the night, but it wasn't going to break her. In the kitchen, she cracked eggs into a pan, the skillet's hiss filling the small silence. The aroma of coffee joined the smell of butter, rich and familiar. There was a kind of reclaiming in the small act of cooking. This space still belonged to her. Behind her, Jin stirred. When she turned, he was sitting up, his suit jacket folded neatly over the back of the couch. He looked around, momentarily disoriented before his gaze found her. "Morning," she said softly, smiling over her shoulder. His mouth curved faintly. "You shouldn't be the one taking care of me." "Too late," she replied. "You need caffeine as much as I do." He rose, adjusting his cuffs automatically, but the stiffness in his posture eased when she handed him a mug. Steam coiled upward between them, and something in his eyes softened. Her phone buzzed on the counter, but neither reached for it. Instead, the sharp chime of his phone broke the quiet. Jin pulled it from his jacket, glanced briefly at the screen, and typed a single reply before locking it again. The weight that had hung over him since last night seemed to ease slightly, his shoulders straightening, the sharp alertness giving way to something calmer. "You look relieved," she said, curious. He looked up, masking the flicker of a smile. "Just good news from work." She nodded, accepting the answer without pressing. They ate together at her small round table, the quiet between them lighter now. The morning sun crept through the blinds, drawing warm gold across the room. When she finished, Amara placed her fork down and sat back. "I'm heading to Solace," she said. "There's a lot to do, calls to make, contractors to line up. The sooner I start, the less time I have to drown in frustration." A muscle in Jin's jaw twitched. "You sure you want to do that today? You didn't sleep much." "I'm sure." Her smile was small but sure. "If I wait, it'll start feeling like defeat. And after last night, I'm not giving anyone that satisfaction." He nodded slowly, pride flickering behind his calm. She hesitated, then reached across the small table and touched his hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for staying, for making sure I was safe. and for reminding me that my mother's legacy isn't just those walls. I needed that. He met her gaze, a quiet sincerity anchoring his words. You don't need reminding, Amara. You just needed someone to say it out loud. Something warm knotted low in her stomach. She smiled, then rose, collecting the dishes. As she moved around the kitchen, he watched her with a calm that wasn't quite peace. His phone vibrated again in his pocket. Another message from Min-jae confirming the raid's success. But this time, he didn't look. For now, this was the world he wanted to hold on to a little longer. The soft scrape of plates, the smell of coffee, and the woman who faced ruin with steady hands and quiet grace.
If you're enjoying Amara and Seo Jin's journey, you're in the right place for more sultry romance stories. Hit like and subscribe to become a part of what we're building with Midnight Silk Romance Stories.
The headquarters occupied the top floor of an unmarked glass tower in Gangnam, 40 stories above the chaos of Seoul traffic, yet the air inside still vibrated with tension. From the conference room's wide windows, Seo Jin could see the city he'd cultivated and controlled, its glittering skyline both trophy and cage. The sound of raised voices echoed down the corridor before Min-jae entered, shutting the reinforced door behind him. His suit was immaculate as always, but there was no mistaking the pulse of adrenaline under the surface. The raid was clean, he reported. Customs and narcotics worked together like clockwork. Kangdong 6 shipment never made it offloading. 3 containers impounded, millions lost. Any arrests? Seo Jin asked, not looking up. Too many for his comfort. His name's not on any paperwork, but everyone's whispering. He's furious. Seo Jin finally looked up from the table where he'd been studying a satellite image of the port. The faintest trace of satisfaction crossed his features. Neither joy nor cruelty, just the efficient acknowledgement of victory. Good. Let him rage. It keeps his hands too busy to reach for anything that belongs to me. Min-jae hesitated. He already reached out. He wants a meeting. He says we've crossed a line. Seo Jin leaned back in his chair. We? No. He crossed it when he touched her. Min-jae nodded once, understanding the shift of pronouns for what it was, proof that this war had turned personal. You're sure about this, Hyungnim? Min-jae asked carefully. Kang's not the type to forgive a public humiliation. You've hurt his pride more than his profits. I've survived worse men with larger empires, Seo Jin said. But his voice betrayed none of the confidence his words implied. Beneath the calm lay a sharp awareness that the game had turned volatile. Min-jae folded his arms. If he keeps pushing, it won't stop with property damage. He'll look for balance in blood. For a moment, the hum of the city felt far away. Seo Jin's thoughts drifted to the woman asleep on his couch only hours ago, the way her breathing had steadied against his shoulder. The image struck him harder than any threat Kang could make. I'm aware, he said finally. Min-jae studied him. Then maybe it's time she learns who you really are, before Kang does it for you. Seo Jin's gaze snapped up, cold enough to silence even his most trusted man. Not yet. Min-jae exhaled, shaking his head. Keeping her in the dark won't protect her forever. I know, Seo Jin replied quietly, but it buys me time to make forever safer for her. He stood, smoothing his jacket with deliberate calm. The movement alone was enough to send his bodyguards outside the door, straightening to attention. Double security around her building. Unmarked cars. Keep your distance. She suspects nothing. Let it stay that way. Yes, sir. Seo Jin walked to the window again, gazing down at the pulsing grid of Seoul's night traffic. He hadn't slept since dawn, but that didn't matter. He could already feel retaliation forming somewhere out there, a shadow pushing against his control. She called that café Solace, he murmured, almost to himself. Tell me something, Min-jae. What do men like us call ours? The right hand hesitated, unsure whether to answer. Finally, he said quietly, Power, Hyungnim. It's the only thing that ever lasts. Seo Jin's reflection in the glass twisted into a weary, humorless smile. That's the lie we all build our thrones on, he said. Then the smile faded, and that lie just cost Kang more than his shipment. He turned from the window, eyes sharp again. He wanted a message? Give him one. Make sure it burns. Min-jae bowed his head slightly, already pulling out his phone as Seo-jin left the room. The door clicked shut behind him, the echo reverberating down the marble corridor like the toll of a hidden war bell. Somewhere below, the city kept moving, bright, alive, indifferent, while two men rewrote its balance of power, and one woman continued to rebuild her café, unaware that loving a man like Seo-jin meant standing directly in the crosshairs of the storm he commanded. By the time Amara pulled into the parking lot at Solace, the morning chill had given way to the kind of brisk sunlight that made everything look deceptively ordinary. But the broken window and makeshift police tape told a different truth. She stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight in her chest ease into resolve. The smell of dust and coffee grounds greeted her when she unlocked the door. Sunlight hit the shattered glass still scattered across the floor, turning it into a mosaic of tiny rainbows, a strange kind of beauty in the wreckage. "All right, Mama," she whispered beneath her breath. "Let's get to work." She rolled up her sleeves, grabbed the broom, and started sweeping in steady, rhythmic strokes. The scrape of bristles against tile was grounding. Each motion was a promise that Solace would rise again. She was halfway through stacking fallen books when a delivery truck eased to a stop outside. The driver stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Delivery for Ms. Carter." Amara frowned. "I didn't order anything." He checked his sheet. "Paid in full. Building supplies, tempered glass, and wood paneling." Her heart caught mid-beat. "By who?" He shrugged, handing her the receipt. There was no name, just a neat stamp at the bottom that read paid. Private account. Amara blinked at the materials being unloaded onto the curb. Whoever had arranged it knew exactly what she needed to start repairs. Gratitude and unease tangled together in her chest. Before she could linger on it, the sound of shouting and laughter echoed from down the street. She turned to see Kelly and Barry approaching, dressed in old jeans, work gloves dangling from their belts. Kelly raised her arms dramatically. "Your reinforcements have arrived, ma'am!" Amara blinked through sudden tears as behind them came Elise, Kalechi, and several others from the poetry circle, each carrying buckets, cleaning rags, and enough energy to chase the gloom out of the room. "You didn't think we were going to sit around and let our stage stay broken, did you?" Kalechi boomed, giving her a bright grin. Elise nodded, shaking a large trash bag. "Besides, poetry night waits for no catastrophe." For the first time in hours, Amara laughed. "You guys are crazy." "Maybe," Kelly said, hugging her tightly, "but we're your kind of crazy." Within minutes, the tiny shop was alive with motion, the air filled with the clatter of brooms, the slap of wet rags, the hum of teamwork. Someone hooked up a Bluetooth speaker, and soft R&B mingled with laughter as they worked. Barry swept up the last of the glass around the counter, while Elise rehung a few paintings. Kalechi somehow acquired a hammer and started talking about feng shui as he patched one of the display shelves. Amara knelt by the overturned bookcase, carefully restacking books, trying not to cry each time she found a cracked spine or torn page. Kelly joined her, handing her a fresh cloth. "Look at this family you've built, girl," she said quietly. "Your mom's got to be grinning right now." Amara swallowed around the lump in her throat. "Yeah," she murmured. "I think she is." Out front, the workers from the anonymous delivery had already begun replacing the shattered window. By late afternoon, Solace smelled like glass cleaner, sawdust, and fresh hope. For all its scars, the space was alive again. When the sun dropped lower, Amara finally straightened, stretching her sore back as Kelly handed her a bottle of water. "You know," Kelly said, "there's poetry in this, turning wreckage into light." Amara tilted her head, smiling at her friend. Maybe that's the only kind of poetry worth living. She glanced through the new window pane. The glass was flawless, but the faint reflection that caught her eye wasn't her own. It was a black sedan parked half a block away, tinted windows glossy under the dying sun. For a second, she thought she imagined it. But when she blinked, the car was gone. She drew in a steady breath and turned back to her friends, deciding not to mention it. Tonight was about rebuilding, about laughter and belonging. Whatever shadows lingered on the edge of her world could wait for later.
If you're enjoying Amara and Seojin's journey, you're in the right place for more sultry romance stories. Hit like and subscribe to become a part of what we're building with Midnight Silk Romance Stories.
The late summer rain had settled into a soft drizzle, tapping gently against the front windows of Solace. The shop was closing early that night. Just a few quiet regulars left, the hum of conversation replaced by the soft crackle of jazz in the background. Amara was behind the counter, wiping it down out of habit more than necessity. Jin Han was perched on one of the stools across from her, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. The sight of him there, relaxed, grounded, had become a familiar rhythm in her days, as much a part of Solace as the smell of roasted beans. He had started dropping by sporadically at first, but now it was almost expected. Sometimes in the morning, sharing coffee before the rush. Sometimes late at night when the door was locked and candles burned low when the rest of Seoul was asleep. Tonight his presence felt different, heavier somehow, though his smile was easy as always. "You know," Amara said finally, resting the rag on the counter, "I've realized something." "Oh?" Jin looked up, one eyebrow raised. "I know exactly what kind of coffee you like, how you take your tea, that you rarely finish your food, and that you get this tiny crease between your eyebrows when you're pretending not to be amused." He chuckled softly. "You're making me sound predictable." "But that's just it," she said, leaning her elbows on the counter. "You're part of my world now. You've fit yourself into it so quietly that I forget sometimes you weren't always here. And yet," she hesitated, searching for the words, "I barely know anything about yours." The air between them changed, not sharp, but still. Jin's smile faltered for the briefest moment. "What do you want to know?" he asked carefully. "I don't know," she admitted. "Where you go when you're not here. Who keeps you awake at night? What makes you happy when no one's watching?" Her voice was soft, not accusing, more like a wish than a demand. Jin set his coffee cup down with deliberate precision, eyes drifting to the rain-smeared window. He could feel the instinct to deflect coil in him, to change the subject, make her laugh, keep the mystery alive. That instinct had kept him alive for years. But it felt wrong to build something real on silence. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the counter, his voice low. "My world isn't simple, Amara. It's a world where trust is a currency, and honesty sometimes is a luxury I can't afford." She studied him, unsure whether he was confessing or warning her. "What did you do before this life?" she asked quietly. "My father built something," he said, taking a breath. "Big, powerful. I spent my youth learning how to run it. When he died, it all became mine. The responsibility, the people depending on it. Depending on me, it's more burden than legacy." She frowned slightly. "You talk about it like you never had a choice." He gave a faint, rueful smile. "Maybe I didn't. Some paths choose you first." Silence stretched again, fuller now, heavy, not uncomfortable. "You ever wish for something else?" she asked. He looked at her for a long time, his gaze softening. "Lately, yes." A faint blush rose to her cheeks under that intensity. "You make that sound dangerous." "It is," he said softly, "when you start to realize that something peaceful can make you forget what you are." The rain outside deepened, a steady rhythm behind the quiet. Amara looked down at the counter, her hand brushing his when she reached for his empty cup. The touch lingered longer than necessary. "I don't need all your secrets, Jin," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But whatever parts of your world you do want to share, I'll listen." He turned his hand over, closing his fingers gently around hers. It was the smallest bridge between them, and yet it felt like crossing continents. Maybe I'll start here, he murmured. I wasn't always this calm. There was a time my anger made the choices for me. But you remind me what it feels like to want peace more than power. Her eyes lifted to his, searching, softening. Then maybe that's our rhythm. You keep coming back until peace feels normal again. He smiled faintly, thumb tracing the edge of her knuckles. Careful, Amara. You sound like hope. And that scares you? More than anything. The lights shimmered on the raindrops outside, and for a while they said nothing more. But something in him shifted, just slightly, as if the boundary between their worlds had thinned. It started the next morning with a simple text. Clear your schedule. I want to show you something. Amara smiled at the message, half amused, half curious. When she stepped outside her apartment a few hours later, she found a black convertible idling at the curb, the top already down. Jin leaned against the driver's door in dark sunglasses, every line of him composed but unmistakably different. Casual slacks, an open white linen shirt, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You said you wanted to see my world, he said. Consider this a part of it. They left Seoul behind in slow layers. At first, the ride was all city chaos. Taxis cutting across lanes, LED billboards washing over. Everything in electric color, the smell of exhaust blending with street food. But as they headed south, neon gave way to green, the sprawl of rice paddies shining beneath a warm sun, the distant hills rolling into a haze of gold. Amara let the wind whip through her hair, the sun warming her bare shoulders above the straps of her sundress. She hid a grin behind her sunglasses, watching the tension slide off him mile by mile. "This your getaway car?" she teased over the wind. "Only when I'm trying to disappear," he said, glancing at her, "and sometimes when I just want to breathe." They traded small talk and laughter until the city dissolved completely. 2 hours later, they pulled off the main road toward a sleepy seaside village, wooden stalls painted in cheerful pastels, families walking hand in hand, the smell of salt and fried batter hanging in the air. He parked along the shoulder where the sand met asphalt. The ocean stretched wide and blue ahead, calm under a high, drifting sky. "This is where my mother used to bring me," Jin said, his voice quieter now. "Back then, it felt like another world. No meetings, no guards, no rules. She'd buy me everything from these stands." He gave a small, wistful smile. "Most of it I wouldn't eat." Amara laughed, the sound blending with the shush of waves. "I can absolutely see that. Little Jin, polite, serious, turning up your nose at the wrong fish cake." He looked sideways at her, mock offended, then broke into a rare, warm chuckle. It was the most relaxed she had ever seen him, hands in pockets, hair tousled by the wind, sunglasses forgotten on the car seat. "Maybe a little," he admitted. They walked along the shore, their footprints dissolving behind them. For a while, neither spoke. He watched the tide sliding in and out and then said softly, "After she died, I didn't come back for years. The first time I made myself return, I sat out there all night and realized how angry I'd become. At the world, at my father, at everything that kept taking." Amara said nothing, sensing that words would only disturb the delicate moment. She simply slipped her hand into his, a quiet reassurance. He glanced down, then back toward the water. "Sometimes I think if she'd lived longer, I'd have turned out differently." "You can still choose differently," she said softly. For a while they stood together in silence, listening to gulls cry and waves breathe. The drive back to Seoul was slower. Dusk spread in ribbons of violet and peach, painting his profile in warm light. Conversation drifted, the kind that filled space without effort. But as the suburbs thickened into skyline, Amara felt the change before she saw it. His shoulders straightened, his gaze sharpened. The easy laughter faded to the quieter shoulders straightened, his gaze sharpened. The easy laughter faded to the quieter alertness she'd come to recognize as his default state. It was like watching armor slide back into place. By the time they crossed the Han River, the convertible top was up again, shutting out the wind and some of the freedom with it. Amara thought he was taking her home, but the road curved upward into a district she didn't recognize, sleek towers of glass and luxury overlooking the city's glittering sprawl. "Where are we going?" she asked, half curious, half thrilled. He only said, "A place I want you to see." The car came to a stop before a modern high-rise marked by discreet security. Inside, the elevator glided soundless to the top floor. He unlocked the door with a fingerprint scan, motioned for her to enter ahead of him. The penthouse surprised her. It wasn't cold or sterile as she'd imagined. It had warmth. Deep wood floors, shelves lined with old books and vinyl records, vivid abstracts splashing color against matte gray walls. A single black grand piano gleamed near a wall of glass that opened onto a terrace with a panoramic view of the city. "Jin," she murmured, stepping slowly inside. "This is beautiful." He hung his jacket over a chair, watching her move through the space. "It's quieter up here. No one can reach you without my consent. That's why I keep it." She turned to him with a smile that held more awe than surprise. "You know, I was expecting something colder, more corporate." "Maybe I used to live that way." Her gaze caught on a framed photograph near the piano, a woman laughing beside a small boy on a beach. She turned to him softly. "Your mother?" He nodded once. She loved color. Said it reminded her that life was still capable of joy. It was then that Amara realized the artwork and warmth weren't for display. They were fragments of a world he'd lost, preserved in this fortress of glass. She looked at him, her heart tight with a tenderness she didn't dare name. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said quietly, "for letting me see this part of you." Seo Jin's expression softened, the hard edge fading from his posture under her gaze. "Thank you for not asking me to explain it." They stood there, wrapped in the hush of the penthouse high above Seoul, neither certain how close to step nor how far to retreat, each caught between the life they knew and the one that, against all reason, they were building together. Amara drifted slowly through the vast space, fingertips grazing the smooth finish of furniture that probably cost more than her café's monthly revenue. Yet there was warmth here, lived warmth, not the cold opulence she might have expected. Her steps slowed near a wall of shelves where metal and leather spines caught the soft, ambient light. Paintings and sculptures mingled with rows of rare books, records, old photographs. But amid all that precision, one thing stood out. A weather-worn notebook wedged between two pristine volumes, its edges creased and corners curling. She reached for it instinctively, then paused, remembering herself. Turning to him across the room, she asked softly, "May I?" Seo Jin's gaze followed her hand. After a quiet beat, he nodded once. Amara brought the notebook back to the couch and opened it. Inside, the pages were filled with neat but emphatic handwriting, ink pressed deep into the paper. A small bookmark protruded near the middle. She thumbed to it, curiosity blooming. Her smile widened as she began to read aloud. "Melanin popping, she walks like sunlight made flesh, her mahogany skin drinking in the day until it glows from within. Her mind cuts like a diamond, illuminated, unbreakable, holding wisdom more precious than any weight of gold. Her voice, low and liquid, pours over the weary like water in a parched land, bringing life where silence once lingered. Peace rests in her eyes, warmth hums in her touch. She carries calm like a secret, offering it only to those who listen deeply. Few have reached the treasures buried in her heart. Fewer still have tasted the nectar of her lips or traced the language of her hips. She is rare, like a star that burned, before the world had words to name its brilliance. When her voice faded, the room seemed to deepen around them. The city beyond the glass was a blur of light, but inside, the air felt still, charged. Amara lowered the notebook, her pulse quickening. He had come to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Those dark eyes met hers, no longer guarded, the longing in them undeniable. "It's you," he said simply. Her breath caught. Every wall she'd built between admiration and emotion folded in on itself under that single confession. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable. His hand came up, fingertips brushing her jaw, tracing the path of a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Their lips met, tentative at first, shy, almost reverent. Then the restraint broke, swallowed by something raw and hungry that neither had planned. Amara's heart thundered against her ribs. She felt the smooth leather of the couch beneath her, the solid assurance of his body so close, and the sharp ache of wanting this moment not to end. Then Jin drew back. His breathing was ragged, the pulse at his throat beat visibly. For a second, he looked as undone as she felt. But then the mask of control slipped back into place, sorrow flickering behind it. "I should take you home," he whispered, voice roughened. She nodded slowly, her chest rising and falling as she tried to steady herself. The distance between them now felt like a gulf. As she stood, she cast one more look toward the open notebook lying on the couch. Its pages fluttered slightly in the breeze from the air vent, that poem glowing under the soft lamplight. A living thing between them, proof of how deeply he saw her and how dangerous that truth might someday become. Neither one spoke during the drive back. The city lights slid across their faces in bands of gold and shadow. For once, Amara couldn't tell whether the silence meant he'd said too much, or not nearly enough. Morning sunlight spilled through Solace's wide front windows, gilding the haze of steam and motion that filled the café. The espresso machine hissed, orders called back and forth mixed with the clatter of cups. It was chaos, but a practiced kind, the kind that pulsed with rhythm. The baristas moved as if choreographed, weaving around one another in a dance born of repetition and muscle memory. Kelly called out numbers over the hum of music, and Amara poured, stirred, smiled, and handed off. Then the door chimed. Jin slipped inside, impeccable as always in a crisp charcoal shirt, though the corner of his mouth softened when his eyes found hers. That small exchange of glances, almost imperceptible amid the bustle, was enough to make Amara's stomach flip. He took his usual seat near the window. A minute later, Amara appeared beside him with a cup of black coffee already waiting in her hand. "Your usual," she said, letting their fingers brush as she passed it over. "Perfect," he replied in that low, unhurried voice that somehow cut through the noise. He stayed only a short while, content to sip his drink and watch her work. It had become their quiet ritual, his morning grounded in the calm she gave to everyone else. When he finally rose and slipped back out into the morning light, Amara's pulse had only just returned to normal. She was wiping down the counter when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A message from Jin Han. "Dinner tonight? Somewhere different." She couldn't help the grin that curved her mouth as she texted back, "Can't wait." When she looked up, he was still within view through the window, waiting at the crosswalk. Their eyes met one last time. She smiled conspiratorially, and he gave a small, knowing nod before turning away. Kelly noticed. Of course she did. "Well, well, being in love looks good on you, sis." Amara rolled her eyes, fighting a blush. Yeah, don't start." Kelly grinned as she squirted whipped cream like punctuation onto a caramel drink. "You two are adorable, the way you orbit around each other like your own little solar system." Amara handed off an iced coffee to a customer at the counter, retorting, "I notice you've been spending plenty of nights at Barry's place. How are the wedding plans going?" Kelly only hummed, focused on filling an order until the morning rush finally thinned. Together, they leaned against the counter, catching their breath. "I've been meaning to tell you something," Kelly said finally. "Barry got his orders. He's being stationed at Fort Gordon, Georgia." "Wow, that's great news," Amara beamed. "Isn't that what you both were hoping for? Closer to family?" "Yeah," Kelly said, paused, then sighed. "But the wedding's being moved up. A little over a month from now. Then my parents want to throw the big one once we're back stateside. That's wonderful, Kelly smiled faintly. She said softly, a flush creeping up her neck. This is beautiful. So why aren't you jumping up and down like you're supposed to be? I am happy, she insisted, though her laugh turned wistful. It's just, everything's happening so fast. Between military stuff, family expectations, it feels like I blinked and the next chapter is already here. Amara reached over, grabbing her hands. Girl, you and Barry have been together 2 years. That's 2 years of practice dealing with change. He's solid. He loves you. He's been clear about what he wants, and you've never been one to shy away from jumping in when your heart knows. Kelly nodded, exhaling some of the tension clinging to her shoulders. You're right. Besides, he's already talking kids. She rolled her eyes. I told him if we get back to the States and I can't fit my wedding dress because of his over-eagerness to start a family, he's sleeping on the couch forever. Amara laughed. It sounds like the two of you are about to start your grand adventure. She pulled her friend into a quick hug. Now come on, we've got another wave of caffeine-deficient zombies incoming. Kelly straightened her apron with mock seriousness, ready and highly caffeinated. As the bell above the door chimed again and the smell of roasted beans thickened, Amara threw one last glance at the empty corner table Jin had been. Their rhythm felt solid, comforting, like the hum of the espresso machine, steady and sure. She didn't know it yet, but that steady rhythm was only the quiet heartbeat before the storm. The air in the Hongdae night market shimmered with noise and color. Neon reflected off puddles left by an afternoon shower, and the scent of grilled meat, sweet batter, and sesame oil hung in the air. Seo Jin strolled beside Amara, one hand in his pocket, the other loosely holding hers as they slipped between stalls. The glow from rows of paper lanterns cast tiny halos in her eyes. Even in a crowd, she somehow carried stillness. You're quiet tonight, he observed. Amara's lips curved faintly. I'm quiet sometimes, she said, tone light but distracted. She was studying a silk scarf rippling on a rack, sea green against her skin. He opened his mouth to tease her for dodging the question, but his phone buzzed in his pocket. Min-jae's encrypted line. He flicked a glance at the message. 2 men, back of the crowd, possible tail, advise caution. For a heartbeat, the market sounds dulled. The laughter, the hawkers shouting prices, the clatter of chopsticks, everything tunneled into the text glowing on the screen. He pocketed the phone quickly, schooling his features. Everything okay? Amara asked, catching the flicker in his expression. Work, he said smoothly. Even on my nights off, they find me. He smiled, the kind that disarmed suspicion, and gestured toward the next stall. Hungry? A few minutes later, they stopped at a vendor with a line curling down the street, famous for its tteokbokki and hot talk pancakes. They ate at a small metal table pressed between stalls, shoulders brushing. Steam rose between them, carrying chili and sugar in equal measure. Jin watched her for a while as she pushed a piece of rice cake through the sauce, brow furrowed slightly in thought. What's on your mind? He asked. She blinked up at him, startled from her reverie. Kelly, she admitted. She and Barry are getting married sooner than I thought. In just over a month, they'll be headed to the States. I'm happy for her, but... She trailed off, glancing down at her plate. You'll miss her, he finished gently. Yeah. She smiled without looking up. We've been through everything together. It's hard to imagine Solace without her laughing in the back room. He nodded, silence warm around them. Then he asked, lightly but sincerely, Do you want that someday? Marriage, family. She sat back, considering. You sound like my mom, she said, laughing softly. Then her gaze turned thoughtful. I've been so focused on building my dream that I haven't thought much about the other ones. But yes, someday. I want a marriage that lasts. And kids, at least 2. I was an only child. I want my future kids to have each other. She looked at him then, eyes candid. What about you? The question landed deeper than she knew. In the few seconds he hesitated, a cascade of images rushed through his mind. Her in white, walking toward him, her fingers laced through his while a baby's cry filled a sunlit room, her laughter echoing through a home unguarded by secrets. Dreams he'd never permitted himself to imagine blinked alive, painfully bright. "I never thought much about it," he said finally, voice low. "My life doesn't leave room for things that last, but—" His eyes softened. "You make it easy to picture something different." Her breath caught, a faint blush rising in her cheeks. "That's probably the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." Out of the corner of his eye, movement tugged him back to reality. Min-jae was across the crowd, pretending to browse a vendor's stand. A subtle nod directed Jin's attention to the opposite corner. Two men drifting between stalls, neither buying nor eating, always facing toward him. His gaze flicked to Amara, radiant under the market lights. He felt the cold press of the pistol beneath his jacket, the shift of alertness hardening behind his smile. "It's getting late," he said softly. "Let's head back." The drive through Seoul's night grid was calm on the surface, but Jin's eyes flicked constantly between mirrors. In the reflection of a store window, a dark sedan lingered 2 cars back. He changed lanes once. The sedan followed. Amara leaned her head against the window, the nighttime breeze tossing her hair. "I love the city when it's like this," she murmured. "Feels almost gentle." He only hummed in response, gripping the wheel tighter. When they reached a red light, headlights flared too close behind. Without warning, he swerved sharply down a narrow side street, accelerating. The tail overshot the turn. Within seconds, he merged onto a parallel avenue, losing them among delivery trucks. "What was that?" She straightened, startled by the sudden maneuver. "Shortcut," he said, the lie careful but even. Traffic was building. Her suspicion lingered, but the cool night air and the rhythmic hum of the tires lulled her back toward calm. When he pulled up outside her building, he cut the engine and stepped out first. The street was quiet, still damp from the earlier rain. Min-jae's car rolled up from the shadows a moment later. He exited, giving a subtle nod, confirmation that the tail had peeled off. Amara stretched, oblivious, turning to thank Jin for the night. He smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Good night, Amara." As she disappeared up the stairs, the warmth in his eyes cooled into steel. He turned to Min-jae, voice low. "Find out who they are and why they're following me this time." Min-jae's expression tightened. "Already on it." Jin looked up at the lit window where Amara moved inside, her silhouette soft against the curtain. He exhaled slowly. The city was alive beneath them, but somewhere in its veins, danger was moving again. And for the first time, he wasn't certain he could keep it from touching her. The bell above Solace's door chimed just as the text from Min-jae came through. He's here, alone, but armed. Seo Jin's fingers tightened imperceptibly around the phone as he stepped inside. The familiar scents of coffee and caramelized sugar met him, along with the low hum of conversation. And at the back, in the corner booth that had become his, sat Kang Dong-sik. Brazen. The rival boss looked perfectly at ease, ankle resting on a knee, newspaper folded neatly beside his untouched cup. A thin, satisfied smile spread across his face when he saw Seo Jin. So this is the message, Jin thought. Not a bullet. A visit. He had to force the rage to stay buried where it belonged. Still, the anger was there, pulsing hot and patient beneath the composure as he crossed the shop. "What the hell do you think you're doing coming here?" Jin said quietly, stopping at the table. Kang Dong-sik clicked his tongue, amusement glinting in his eyes. "Language, Seo Jin. Such harsh words in such a charming place. Naturally, I came to see you, and to learn what it is you find so irresistible about this little coffee shop." Before Jin could respond, Amara appeared, the faint smell of vanilla trailing with her. She flashed her usual warm smile, the one that loosened the grind in Jin's chest, and set a familiar mug of coffee in front of him. "Here you go, Jin Han," she said. then turned politely to Kang Dong-sik. "Would you care for more tea, sir?" Kang Dong-sik straightened with a performer's grace, sliding the cup toward her. "Yes, Amara, is it? That would be lovely." As he handed the cup over, his fingers brushed hers deliberately. Jin saw the shift. Amara's smile dimmed, discomfort flickering through her posture. His jaw flexed once. "If you ever touch her again—" Kang's low chuckle cut him off. "Ah, protective of your exotic little flower, are we? No need to snarl, my friend. I'm not into slumming. I simply wanted to see with my own eyes what, or should I say who, has cost me millions." His eyes hardened briefly, a flash of steel behind the smirk. Every instinct screamed to end him there. Instead, Jin clenched his hands beneath the table, nails biting into his palm. Amara returned a moment later, posture more formal, and placed the steaming mug of tea in front of Kang. "Here you are, sir." Her gaze moved to Jin. "Jin Han, are you good?" He nodded once, forcing calm into his face. "Yes." She hesitated, reading something brittle in his expression, then said softly, "Let me know if you two need anything else," before retreating to the counter with a troubled glance over her shoulder. The moment she left, Kang laughed under his breath. "Jin Han, that's what you go by now?" He rolled the name across his tongue like a joke. Jin said nothing. "Does she know?" Kang continued, voice pitched low enough for only the two of them. "Who you are, what you are, or does she think you're just another well-dressed customer with expensive taste?" Seo Jin met his gaze, cold and quiet. "You're playing a dangerous game coming here." "Am I?" Kang smiled, sipping the tea Amara had poured. "The way I see it, you're the one with something to lose. You've mixed love and family business, and you've made yourself soft. That's when the world starts cutting." He rose smoothly, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit. "I'll be in touch, old friend. Try not to let the place burn down." The bell chimed as Kang Dong-sik exited, leaving the stench of arrogance in his wake. For several seconds, Jin stayed seated, hands motionless around his untouched coffee. His throat was tight. His silence was the only thing keeping his fury from spilling into the sunlight. "Jin Han?" He looked up to see Amara approaching cautiously, worry etched across her face. She slid into the space Kang had vacated. "Who was that?" she asked gently. He summoned a calm smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A former business associate." Amara studied him for a moment longer, clearly unconvinced but letting it go. "He seemed unpleasant." "You could say that." He tried to soften his tone. "Don't worry about him. He won't be back." She nodded slowly, though unease flickered in her eyes. "Promise me." "I promise," he said. She offered a small, fragile smile and walked back toward the counter. Only after she turned away did Seo Jin reach for his phone, typing a single message to Min Jae. "Follow him. No mistakes this time." He took one last sip of his coffee, now gone cold, and set the cup down with deliberate care. Amara's laughter floated from behind the counter, mingling with the low hum of the café. It was the sound of everything decent he had left. Kang Dong-sik had just touched it, and that meant war.
Will Kang Dong-sik have the last laugh at Seo Jin and Amara's expense? Will Seo Jin's carefully spun lies finally catch up to him and shatter everything he's beginning to feel? Hit the notification button to be the first to tune in for the stunning conclusion of Solace in Part 3.